You mentioned about having to be voluminous on account of seeking to permit. There's a whole bunch of topics that he brings up. I mean, I don't know if you want to even do a top five list of the topics that
No,
he,
no, I
not even,
don't.
I mean, there needs to be a top five. You could do a top 10.
Let's look at the last paragraph.
I like that.
The last paragraph, he sort of like goes through a little checklist. Right? Let's bundle together all of the reasons to be lenient. Right? To bring them all together on the matter of the Heusenblasen.
Yeah.
The first one, because it's dried out, it's not food. Le'inyan tuma, it's not food it's not considered treif. Who hadin le'inyan iser, right? It loses its status as tame, and if it loses its status as tame, it also loses its status as forbidden. And then he goes into a separate thing because, right?
I do want to point out
whether or not
I do want to point out we actually haven't translated Oisenblazen. And so the blas or the bloisen is bladders and the hoisen is the sturgeon.
Is the name of the fish. It's called stirl. It's definitely a sturgeon, but it's probably meaning it could be a generic term for sturgeon, whereas the stirl, which is the what's known today as sterlet, is a particular species of and a particularly small species of sturgeon. Like he wants to do a summary here, but then he says like there's a question of whether or not, like what's the relationship. There's certain things that are not things that are not kosher are also ritually impure, are also tameh. And he's getting into the question of what's the relationship between the ritual impurity and the non-kosher status of something. Right. So he says, if you think that it's basically one implies the other, then if it's dried out, it's not tameh. And so if it's dried out, it wouldn't be prohibited to consume. But even if you don't assume that something can be prohibited from eating, even if it lost its tuma, right? That's what he says here. Liman de yalif isur mituma. You learn out the non-kosher status, the prohibited to eat status, from its impure status. Afilu mandalo yalif, even one who doesn't make that equation, who rak chumra derabanan, right? That's because it's a chumra derabanan. It's a midirabanan that you would have to treat it as being non-kosher to eat. It's a chumra.
It's a rabbinic stringency.
It's a rabbinic stringency, and in this case, ra'ui lelech achar hamekel. Right? We should follow the lenient position because we're talking about a chumra midirabanan. Right, and we have principles about this, right? If there's a suffix about a chumra midirabanan, we generally go lakud. Okay, ela da'akati ein ra'oi la'asod ken lechatchila, but still, this doesn't get out of the problem of lechatchila. You shouldn't do it ab initio, right? You shouldn't put it in there knowing that it's non-kosher, knowing that you're putting it into your food.
Yeah.
Lechatchila yesh lachol divrei machmir. Really, lechatchila, you should be concerned about the view of the stringent view. The low nalif is for mituma, that we don't derive the non-kosher status from the impure status. Vikatavti, and I wrote, right, this is his recap. The Heusenblasen she'enam ru'uyim b'fnei atzmo, since nobody would eat that, like you're not going to eat fish bladder chips, right? So ein kan rakatam habatal b'shishim. You don't eat them by themselves. So all you have here is the flavor, and the flavor is batal b'shishim, right? There's the thing itself, you don't want it. You don't. In fact, you try to fish it out. Sorry, pardon the pun. You try to take it out.
It's appropriate.
Right? It falls to the bottom, and you take it out. Right. So even the people that want to be machmir, they're not machmir in this case. And this entire principle of ein mevatlin isur lechatchila is a derabanan principle. So you can rely on the view that there's no isur here at all, and if there's no isur, there's no bittul isur lechatchila, meaning you can take the lenient view, because in a question of a derabanan, you can take a lenient view. Ein kan isur klal dialfin and mituma va'od. Moreover, tzir dagim urak derabanan, right? The brine of fish is only asur derabanan. Afilu bekavush, even if it was been in,
pickled.
If it's been pickled.
Yeah.
Umela be'asur derabanan in kavush oser yoser miklipa. Right. We can, these are the. He's raising issue after issue, and just sort of saying that like it's all, you're talking about multiple derabanans on derabanans, principles that are derabanan that you want to apply in something that might not be usher at all, and so you can say that we could be makel, you can be lenient. Mamela, consequently, these Heisenblasen, right, these fish bladders, they will never impart tastes, they will never impart flavor to the mixture. Right, it's like something that you normally use it with large quantities, and a little bit of iser got absorbed into it. Iser muat. Right, meaning like let's say a tiny little bit of something non-kosher got stuck, fell into an empty cholent pot. Does that mean that you're not allowed to use the cholent pot anymore because when you put kosher food in it, it's going to be bitul iser lechatchila? No, we don't say that because darko l'shtamish b'shefa, you usually use it for much bigger quantities, and such a tiny little bit of iser fell in even when it was empty, so you could be mivatal the iser even lechatchila, but that's not called bitul iser lechatchila. The gam. Furthermore, achar shehochachti she'ein kol hadvarim shayach b'hu kavush, that not everything can be pickled, right? There are things that you can't, you say bitul iser lechatchila, you say kavush k'mevushal. Not everything is kavush. Not everything imparts flavor when it's steeped in a liquid medium. And even though fish, there is such a thing as, meaning we have, pickled herring, salted fish is a thing, right? So even though the Mishnah talks about kavush, the status of kavush when it comes to fish, we call makum ulai hainu bebasar hadak. That might only be referring to the flesh. When you're talking about the bladder, it's just like this white skin, ba'alma. People don't pickle it. It's suffix derabanan, and therefore it's a suffix derabanan, so you can be meko. Right? And since it's bitul iser lechatchila is only midarabanan, and it's a suffix derabanan, when it comes to the stuff that comes out of a fish, like brine, even if it's pickled, it's only midarabanan. And you can add to this, that the only medium that could be used for pickling is brine or vinegar, right? And here you're talking about mead or med or wine or beer. All these reasons, right? You can put these fish platters, these isinglass, into wine or into med, since his intent is not to be mevatalit, that's to clarify the beverage, and to bring to cause the sediment to sink.
And by the way, before you go on and really take us home, I just want to point out the stuff that's sort of in the middle. At least I know with beer, I assume the same with mead and wine. It's going to be yeast. It's going to be the yeast stuff, and then also with beer, maybe with mead, also it could be like proteins as well.
So he says, and this is a line that it first appears in the Gemara in Psachim. And he says, Hanach Yisrael ein neviim heim b'nei neviim heim, right? That there's a certain, that the Jewish people have a certain prophetic intuition, right? And it's a well-known statement. And it's also, you can see why it's why it would be controversial, right? That it essentially is saying that if this is what Jews do, this is the Jewish intuition is prophetic. So if they intuit that this is what you're supposed to be doing, then there's something to that.